Hello, I'm Dave and I have another game. This is a correspondence game that I played on the IECG. My opponent is from Romania and we're about evenly matched in this game by our ratings, even though it doesn't look like it by the way the game was played. The game is a King's Indian defense, the four-pawn variation, and the ECO code is E76. The themes we'll be looking at will be the lack of a plan by black, and not anticipating my opponent's moves, and reacting to my opponent's moves instead of looking for the best move for me to play. We'll get started here. I'm playing black, and it opens with the normal opening moves to the King's Indian defense, which are d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight to c3, d6, e4, bishop to g7, and bishop to f4, which signifies the four pawns attack in this variation. I played c5, counterattacking here on white's center, hoping to take advantage with possibly controlling the square later with my pawn and bishop. Knight f3, white castles, and white pushes his pawn e5, gaining a little more space here in the center. I played knight to g4, which is a novelty. Normally the knight is retreated to e8, but in the game I had a different idea. What I wanted to do was play this knight to f6 and then to f5, bringing this pawn up to h5 to protect the g4 square. And with my knight here, I thought it would also be a good square to help influence the d4 square, which is a kind of a key square for black in this defense. So anyway, back to the game. Like I said, he pushed e5, and I played knight to g4. Played 3, knight to h, d5, and I played e6. He plays e takes d6, queen takes d6, and then knight to b5. I seen this knight was going to be could be a pain in my side here, putting a lot of influence on my queen side, and I decided I wanted to push this knight back. But first, of course, with my queen being under attack, I moved it, and then he played bishop e2. And I think I made a slight, well, I know I made a slight error here. Like I said, I was reacting to white's move. I wanted to remove the knight, and instead of looking for really the best move for my position, I was stuck on this idea of pushing the knight back first, and I played a6. A much better move for black would have been e takes d5, c takes d5, and then knight to f5. Posting my knight where I wanted it, as I stated earlier, and this knight, whoops, wouldn't have influence over these dark squares. The dark squared bishop would have influence over this diagonal, and he could possibly post himself here at d4, putting pressure on white's king side. The queen would also have influence on this diagonal, and possibly on this rank also. So I think this would have been a much better move for black, and I did not play it, unfortunately, but I did play a6, and white retreated his knight to c3. Even though I'm considered equal in this position, I think I would have been much better if I would have played the other variation. So on with the game, I played knight to f5, castle, knight d4, rook to e1, knight takes e2, and I played this move so that I would have the two bishops, and as the game opened up, the two bishops hopefully would be stronger than the two knights and his one bishop, and that was the reasoning for this move. White retook with the queen, which is the better recapture instead of the knight, and here I made a mistake. I played knight to d7. Let's just go back here just for a second. Before I made this move, I looked at my position and I seen that I had three pieces here that was undeveloped, and I wanted to get them out, and I thought that what I wanted to do was play this knight to d7 and then to f6 and then maybe bring this bishop to d7 and bring the rook over to the center. But instead, which would have been, that's what I had in mind. And as a result, like I said, I played knight to d7, and this left this e6 pawn under defended. I only had this pawn and the queen defending it, instead of having in addition to the bishop. So I paid for it dearly. White took with his pawn, I retook with the queen, and if I had retaken with the f pawn, the game would have still transposed to the position it ended up here very shortly, with queen takes queen, f takes queen, and then rook takes pawn, and white is now one pawn ahead. I played knight to f6, rook to e7. It's a good square for the rook. It has its rank where it can help influence play on this rank, which is always very strong. Gives possibility of white bringing his other rook up and teaming up and possibly having a mate of some type along this back rank. I played rook to b8, and he plays knight e5, which is an ideal square for this knight. White is slowly exerting more and more pressure on my position. With this knight, he controls these white squares. This knight also controls some key white squares in my position. And with this rook here, you can see that white pretty well controls almost my entire position. After knight e5, I played rook to d8. He played bishop to e3. And then I played a really bad move, which was knight to d7. A better move, of course, would have been like bishop to f8. He would have played bishop to take c5, and I could have played rook to d2. And I would have been the one that had the rook on the second rank, and his rook to his undefended bishop. But I didn't make that move. I made this terrible move of knight to d7, and white quickly responded rook to d1, pinning the knight to my rook. He's attacking this knight 3 times. He's got a knight, rook, and second rook, and I'm only defending it with these 2 pieces. I cannot move this knight, let's say, to b6, because then this rook would be undefended, and he could take with his rook with check, and that'd be it for me. So I played king to f8, plays rook at e takes d7, bishop takes d7, knight takes d7, forking king and rook. I moved my king. I could have taken with my rook, about the same result. Knight takes b8, rook takes b8, knight to e4, and b6. And this being a correspondence game, I thought, well, I see this b2 pawn. It kind of bring me back maybe to just being a knight down instead of a knight and a pawn. Maybe I could pick up a second pawn. Maybe I'll get lucky and come back. And my opponent played f5, and I went ahead and took this pawn. And then he responded f6. And then I realized this game was over, because what was going to happen was white would play his knight to d6 with check, but the only move I would have would be to bring my king to f8. Then he would push his pawn to f7, bring his bishop to h6 with check. I would have to move my king. He would then queen his pawn. I would then have to exchange the rook for his newly promoted queen and bishop, or knight. I'm sorry, bishop. And he would have had a 1 game where he would be looking at a knight and rook versus my lone bishop. So at this point, I went ahead and resigned, and I hope everybody enjoyed the game. This is a game I lost, but I learned a lot from it. It was definitely not one of my better games and better performances, but hope you enjoyed it, and take care and see you next time.